2030.
Saudi Arabia, the point of investment fund,
It's a
there's
big
a lot of
vision.
excitement
This
around
transformational
NEOM specifically.
change. Every aspect of the kingdom, economic, social, cultural, religious.
The 2030.
This is the 2030.
Yalla.
Halla Walla Hannah, episode 15 of the 2030 podcast. We have a great episode this week. Salman Al-Sudairi, partner at Latham & Watkins in Riyadh. He will be joining us in just a few minutes for an exclusive discussion and insights on the new rules and guidelines issued by Saudi Arabia's Capital Market Authority for the offering and listing of foreign companies on the kingdom's main market. This is the kind of stuff we want to talk about on the 2030, especially when it comes to foreign companies considering to their IPOs in Saudi Arabia, which is now kind of a hot topic and certainly of interest to foreign companies. So it's nice that they're putting this information out there and that we're covering it as well. This is from Sultan via email. Love the show, Lucian. Congrats. It was really cool to hear the Gada Al Muhanna segment this week on the Hajj, imagery and the story of the Dutch visitor. Amazing content. Keep it up, you too. I assume that means you as well. Thank you, Sultan. And
you and Hada, they're like, just
yeah.
She has nothing to
Forget
offer.
Hannah, yeah. You can email us and reach out to us on LinkedIn or email or wherever you're listening or viewing this. And we love to hear feedback on what we're doing. We love to hear the good. We love to hear the bad as well. We will read the bad feedback we get as well. We are seeing a really cool, very strong audience growth. I think maybe faster than I would have expected. We actually didn't talk about this, but just so it's really nice to hear from everybody. It means a lot. It makes it more fun for us to do this when we get feedback from people saying, hey, I heard this or that. So anyway, thank you so much for that, Sultan. And if you haven't done so yet, please follow us on LinkedIn but ideally Instagram, X, Facebook, TikTok for the kids listening out there. We're on all of those platforms now, and we're starting to upload regular content to those platforms in the form of sort of shorter segments and snippets. So check us out there if you would. We're going to jump right into this interview with Salman, who's excellent. He's worked on dozens and dozens of IPOs in Saudi Arabia's stock market. He's been there doing it since 2004. It's kind of like talking to the guy. Like I want to call him Mr. IPO, but he would definitely object to that name, object in a legal form. But really a great conversation. So we're going to jump right into it this week. Enjoy.
This is the 2030.
Saudi Arabia's Capital Market Authority recently published new guidelines for the offering and listing of foreign companies on the kingdom's main market, clarifying potential avenues for non-Saudi companies to list securities in Saudi Arabia through cross-listings and dual listings. Joining us on the 2030 to discuss that and other topics, Salman Al-Sudairi, Chair of the Saudi Arabia Practice and Office Managing Partner for the Middle East and North Africa at Latham & Watkins. Salman, hello. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Lucian. Pleasure to be with you.
Welcome on the show, Salman. It's great to have you here. I would love to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about kind of the development of the Saudi stock market in recent years and where the market is today.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Hannah. And thank you, Lucian and Hannah, for inviting me to join you. And thank you for creating this amazing platform as well. I think it's important to maybe look at where the stock market, where the Saudi exchange is right now. Take a look a little bit to how it got here and look forward a little bit to its growth and where it's going. If we're looking at where the stock exchange is today, we're really talking about the largest stock exchange in the region, one of the largest stock exchanges globally. It's about 240 companies listed in the main market, about 80 companies listed on the secondary market or NUMU, which is for smaller companies. You're talking about a market with a market cap of about 11 trillion SAR. So that's over around $3 trillion. And you're also looking at, what I think is one of the most transparent markets in the region. And that's really a testament to the regulator, to the stock exchange, and to what we're seeing, a very liquid exchange as well, which is great. And for me, what's really interesting is how quick that development has happened. Because when you look at the regulations for the capital markets law, which is the main law for capital markets, was only something that was issued in 2003. So we're really talking about a development over the course of about 20 years. Prior to that, there was an exchange, but it was an over-the-counter exchange. So all these innovations, all these developments around corporate governance, around disclosure requirements, around really seeing more interesting products being developed in the exchange. These are all very, very recent developments. And for me, when I started working in this market, and the first IPO that I worked on back in 2004, it was a very, very different market in terms of level of sophistication from where it is now. We are seeing more foreign investors now in the market. We are seeing a standard of disclosure that is at the same level, and in some instances higher than what you would typically see in other exchanges, which is really a testament to that development, over the years. And if we're looking at where the stock market is going in the future, we are seeing continual innovation. So for a very long time, what we saw was just primary issuances. What we're seeing now are also what we call follow-on issuances, i.e. kind of secondary issuances. So you may have seen Saudi Aramco just recently did a large follow-on issuance. There are, much more of a push in that direction of seeing a lot of the companies that are currently listed doing follow-on offerings, either through accelerated book building transactions, fully marketed offerings, like what we saw with Saudi Aramco, block sales, etc. We're also seeing such a huge pipeline of companies that are looking to go public. In my journey with the market, I've never seen this level of interest of new issuers coming into the market. And it's really quite diverse, right? It's from across the board. You're talking about retail companies, you're talking about the government, using it as a means of privatization, new technology companies and startups that are looking for the stock market as a way to exit. And I think that's just going to continue as we move forward and as this market continues to develop.
Yes, so you touched on it. You have a long track record in Saudi Arabia, advising on nearly every major IPO since 2011. You said 2004 was your first. And you also worked on the massive Saudi Aramco IPO, $25.6 billion. Can you share with our listeners and viewers more about your deep experience with the Saudi stock market?
Sure. So when I first started working in this market, I moved after graduating from law school. I came to Saudi in 2003. And at that time, we worked on a number of IPOs, and like I said, it was a relatively early stage in the development of the Saudi Stock Exchange. And since then, I did go back to the US for a couple of years to work there and came back again in 2010. And I've had the great fortune of working on a large number of IPOs, from that time until today. I've worked on about 50 offerings, various offerings in the Saudi stock market. And what we have seen, like I said, is a market that was very local initially, where you looked at the investor base, it was very much a local investor base. Today, most of the offerings that we see out there do have some level of international marketing as well. So they are, Reg S offerings or 144A offerings, i.e. being offered to investors outside of the kingdom. We have seen a lot more market participants, looking, at this market. Initially, it was a lot more of a retail market. And what I mean by that is we would see individual investors that are mainly participating in the market. Today, it's become significantly more institutional in its approach. And it's really quite diverse when we talk about it from an institutional standpoint. And that's really been a very, very quick acceleration. And what's also, for me remarkable is in that period of time, we've had a number of market downturns as well. So we've seen that cycle. So there have been periods of time where you did not see a lot of issuances for an extended time, where you have seen the market drop. And even with that, it's always bounced back and it's always done, extremely well. And we've seen a lot more companies that are looking to list, a lot more companies that are looking to engage, a lot more investors that are interested in the space as well.
Well, that's super interesting. And I mean, it seems like it's a more diverse range of companies as well. So the new guidelines that were published by the Saudi Authority clarify the rules surrounding 3 avenues through which non-Saudi companies can list their shares. Could you walk our listeners and viewers through these recently published guidelines?
Sure. So, as I'm sure you're aware and the listeners are aware, there is a big initiative in the kingdom right now about kind of becoming more regional and becoming more global. So, as you've probably seen, there is the RHQ initiative, which is international companies bringing their regional headquarters into the kingdom. And the stock exchange is looking at things from the same perspective. How do we see regional companies and international companies issue in the kingdom? So access the market as issuers. And this has been a discussion for quite a period of time. And in fact, the regulations do allow for it. And we have seen one case where there was an Abu Dhabi company, which is partially owned by PIF and partially owned by an Emirati investor, that did a dual listing, right? So it was a company that was incorporated in the UAE, and it listed both in the Saudi Stock Exchange and the Abu Dhabi Stock Exchange at the same time. And this was Americana Restaurants. So that was the pilot. This is a continuation. So what the exchange has done is provide the guidelines or clearer guidelines in terms of the process for companies that are either currently listed in another stock exchange or that want to do a concurrent listing both in another stock exchange and the Saudi Stock Exchange to do so. So what this is not the ability of a foreign company to directly list in the Saudi market. We're still not there as a market. So you would need to either be listed abroad or doing another offering concurrently abroad. And what the rules have done is they've set out the eligibility requirements, right? So what are the things that these companies have to have in place prior to going through this process? So they must be either currently listed or concurrently listed at a recognized exchange. And from our perspective and where we see that, these are recognized exchanges regionally or globally. It has to be a joint stock company that is similar to a joint stock company in Saudi. There are certain market cap requirements. So this needs to be a company with a market cap of approximately 4 billion Saudi Arabian riyals, or will have that market cap once listed. There is a requirement for it to have at least 2 directors who are residents in the kingdom. So for example, if you have a Omani company or a Kuwaiti company that wants to do a cross listing in the kingdom, at least 2 of its directors need to be residents in the kingdom. There is also some subjective elements around the value add to the Saudi economy and to the Saudi market. And those are, generally what they're looked at. Now, there's also a process which is extremely, extremely important for issuers where you can do a preliminary assessment. So reach out to the exchange, give them a certain set of, how you meet those eligibility criteria, have an engagement back and forth with the exchange, and they would give kind of the initial green light, which is very, very important. So you don't have companies that go through an entire process and then, for example, not be viewed as adding value to the Saudi market or to the Saudi economy, which is extremely important. And that's really one thing that we've seen quite a bit. And one of the things that has helped the exchange in its development is the exchange themselves are quite responsive. They do talk to potential issuers. They do talk to financial advisors. Same thing with the regulator, the Capital Markets Authority. And I think this is part of it. And then there are also other, elements that they need to comply with going forward in terms of financial statements and, in terms of certain regulations from a corporate governance standpoint, et cetera. But, just to put it simply, once that company meets the eligibility requirements, you go through that assessment process with the exchange, and then you have to comply with some of the ongoing obligations that would be required for them.
Yeah, so on that added value element of the requirements, you note that it does not really provide clear criteria for establishing such added value, but it's sort of subjective, like you just said. Can you tell us about sort of what they're looking for? I mean, like what is defined as added value, at least in your mind, as maybe an advisor to companies that might dual list in Saudi Arabia? And how do you guys sort of advise other companies who ask you the same question I'm asking you now?
Yeah. So I think what they would look at, and again, like I said, there are no specific criteria or litmus tests, and that's important. but it's the type of things of how much of the company's operations are in Saudi, how many, how much of the revenues are derived from the kingdom, how much is invested back into the kingdom. Does this company have any facilities in the kingdom? Is there any manufacturing in the kingdom? How much of the employees are Saudi nationals? So like I said, they've kept it vague on purpose because it really varies depending on the sector and depending on the company that we're talking about. But generally, the sense is we want to make sure that these are companies that will add value to the kingdom and are not just companies that may potentially take liquidity out of the system and take it out to other markets. Because again, it is still a young market and we need to make sure that there's that right balance. So while we do have a lot of foreign investors coming into the market, it's also important to make sure that there isn't a lot of money that's coming out of the system and not being balanced by the money that's coming in. And I think for the exchange, that's a big part of it. It's ensuring that these companies are really companies that are bringing value to Saudi, that are, in line with what the country is trying to do from a development strategy. These are companies that have operations in the kingdom. These are companies that have individuals or employees that are in the kingdom, that are not just generating revenues in the kingdom, but really investing in the kingdom as well.
No, that's super interesting. I mean, is there a profile of companies that are really interested in listing that you're familiar with or kind of been, exposed to?
Yeah. So we've seen a really broad range of companies that have been interested in this and have already, started looking at that process. So companies like Americana, for example, which has Saudi shareholders, which is incorporated outside of the kingdom, which a lot of their operations are in the kingdom, are great candidates for that. They don't want to reorganize their business completely to bring it into the kingdom. They still want to maintain their incorporation outside of the kingdom. I think this is a great potential avenue for a lot of technology companies, because when we look at a lot of the regional technology and startups, a lot of them are incorporated in ADGM or other places. Now they may need to reincorporate in an onshore jurisdiction. However, there are companies that can have this as a potential avenue for them because they do have shareholders that are currently broad-based. Maybe there are a lot of advantages for them to remain outside or even tax advantages. However, they still want to have the ability to access the Saudi exchange. This could also be a very interesting opportunity for larger established companies, particularly those in the region that maybe are currently listed in other stock exchanges, but they aren't very liquid, whether it's regional banks, whether it's regional oil companies. These are large manufacturing companies, large industrial companies that could really benefit from that cross listing because they already have some level of operations in the kingdom, and at the same time would have the ability to access a significantly larger stock market than where they're operating. There could also be, some opportunities for international or global companies that are listed outside of the region to potentially access the Saudi market because, again, there is a specific Saudi link, whether on the shareholding or on the operational side. I think that'll be extremely interesting, once we start to see companies that are not just regional companies, but also global companies that are maybe listed in London or listed in Hong Kong or listed in other jurisdictions that are looking to do some concurrent listing or cross listing in the Saudi market.
I think I have one more question just about that. Is a lot of times people, when they're thinking about entering the Saudi market, also assume that they need to have a partner that is operating within Saudi Arabia. But kind of the guidelines, as you were explaining them, means that you just need to have board members that are living within Saudi Arabia. Do they just need to live there? Do they need to be Saudi?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to look at it a little bit differently or from two different perspectives. So in terms of accessing the Saudi market as a private company, there may be some advantages or benefits to having a Saudi partner. There's no requirement to have a Saudi partner. There's no legal requirement to have a Saudi partner. Sometimes in very specific industries for licensing reasons, there may be something, but that's definitely not a requirement, but there may be some business advantages. When we're talking about companies that are looking to list in the kingdom or access the market, the only requirement from a personnel standpoint in terms of what's currently in the rules is to have 2 board members. They don't have to be Saudi nationals, but they do have to be residents in the kingdom, i.e. they have work authorization in the kingdom. Maybe when we start seeing this, kind of be applied, there may be some requirements in terms of how long they are in the kingdom, in terms of, some sort of on the ground requirement. However, what the rules say is these have to be two individuals, at least two individuals who are residents in the kingdom, either Saudi national or those who have work authorization to be in the kingdom.
So the reforms happening in Saudi Arabia and its stock market are kind of part of a larger transformation program. That's the subject of this podcast in general. The legal system itself has seen enormous change and reforms to which you've been a party, an observer, you've been part of it. And, it would be impossible with the time we have right now to list all these changes that are happening sort of right before our very eyes, but it's a historic era. I think you would probably agree with that. Can you tell us some of the more significant changes for you as a practicing attorney in Saudi Arabia and as a citizen stakeholder in the vision? And also, what might be coming next? What are you guys looking out for?
So I think, we can look at this in different ways. Like you said, Lucian, absolutely, there have been a lot of new laws and regulations that have been passed very recently that have been quite meaningful and quite important. But I think for me, what's been even more significant is just the way that a lot of these regulations have been developed and laws have been developed. These are all laws that are meant to meet very specific policy objectives. These are not just laws that are kind of in a vacuum, that don't necessarily fit into the broader policy. And I think what the leadership has done recently, and it really has been a different way of approaching regulations. So we're really thinking about the policy and then the regulations that help fulfill that policy. And then there's a dynamism in terms of changing that or continuing to improve that. So what we've seen is really two ends. We've seen a lot of new laws. So there have been things in and around codification of certain principles in order to give better transparency and better visibility in the market. So we saw that with the civil transaction law, the personal status law, the law of evidence. There have been some laws around, broader structural elements, such as the commercial court law, and then, looking at how the legal system or the dispute mechanisms within the legal system operate. There have also been laws that are specific to specific subject matters. I look at data privacy as an example, the new IP law, different angles that are really, really aimed at specific things. And there have been a lot of reforms of pre-existing laws and looking at those laws anew. So we do have a new companies law, for example. We had a companies law that had not been altered for a very long time until 2012. And now it's being altered again, and there are continual changes with that. We see that with the CMA as well, where the regulations are continually improved, continually changed. The tax law and the tax authorities that are continually changed. So to me, that's been very, a very interesting and different approach to it. I look at it, for example, in my own industry, right? There is a law that is regulating the licensing of law firms. For a very, very, very long time, it was on the books without any changes. And because that law was there, a lot of different practices were developing around international law firms being affiliated with local law firms without really setting the principles of what that means or how they can work together or not work together. So it created a little bit of confusion in the market. That law was recently amended to allow international law firms to operate directly in the kingdom. Even until very, very recently, they're relooking at it again to say, well, should that should it be amended again or looked at again to allow them to operate 100% or wholly owned in the kingdom? Currently, you have to partner up with a Saudi lawyer. And to me, those are things that are happening very quickly. And that really is the big change that we've seen. In the past, we used to talk about what we used to always say was tolerated practices. So the law maybe doesn't permit something, or it's not clear how it is in the law. However, it's a tolerated practice because there has not been a change in the law. And I think a lot of what's happening now is really changing that, right? So there's a lot more transparency. There's a lot more certainty. It's giving foreign investors a lot more certainty. It's giving a lot of us that are currently in the market, a lot of certainty in terms of how to go forward instead of relying on quote unquote tolerated practices or loopholes in the law.
That's very interesting, and kind of you've highlighted some of the key changes that maybe have really impacted the way you work and what you're watching. But I wonder if that's also inspiring other people within kind of the legal field. Is it making it a more appealing job track, a career track for young people? Is there a lack of talent in the space, or are you able to recruit talent within the space? I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I do think the profession has really grown a lot because of a lot of these changes. There's a lot more focus on what we're doing. In fact, when you look at the government right now, there are a lot of lawyers that are in the government that are really a big part of these reforms. So yes, it definitely has impacted or affected our profession, the way that lawyers are viewed, in the kingdom. I think given the change that has happened, given the growth of Saudi, human capital can sometimes be a challenge, undoubtedly. It is something that we've seen in our own profession as well, where those that are very good, are being approached by either new entrants into the market, by the government, by others. So we have to continually train more lawyers to really kind of bring them into the market. I think the education system has done a very, very good job as well in terms of graduating more lawyers. It's incumbent on us as law firms to continue to train them. Other parts of the market are also doing a good job in terms of training lawyers. But it is something that can be a challenge, and there's a lot more that we should be doing and we can be doing in that regard. I mean, for us, just as a law firm at Latham & Watkins, we always have trainees. We do invest quite a bit in our training program because it is extremely important to make sure that we have people that are not only graduating to be lawyers with us, but also going into the market, working for other law firms, working for government, working for clients. And I've seen other law firms do the same thing. And I do think that's extremely important. I mean, I mentioned that I started working in 2004. When I started working, there were 3 lawyers in my office, right? And we were considered one of the bigger law firms in the market. Today, I've got about 45 lawyers in this office, and I know that other law firms have, large amounts of lawyers as well. And I think the other interesting thing, and we've definitely seen this as this market has opened up, we've seen a lot of expats also coming into this market, and they've been hugely value added as well because they're bringing in their expertise. They're able to train young Saudis, and that's been, extremely, extremely important to the development of the legal market, but also other markets and professional services as a whole.
So how are they approaching the market? The Kirkland and Ellis's, Esquire, Patton Boggs, these guys that are sort of, white shoe or whatever you want to call them from the West, how are they approaching the market? Are they coming in and collaborating with lawyers like yourself and other lawyers that are Saudi and saying, hey, we want to be part of this market? Or do they have a different attitude? What are they trying to achieve in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, look, I think what we've seen with a lot of the new market entrants, we as Latham & Watkins have been in this market since 2010 through the affiliation and then got licensed in the first rounds of the licensing. So we are here fully as a law firm. We've seen new entrants in the market where they have hired locally or have brought expertise from abroad. I think a lot of them are starting to invest quite a bit in their own training program, but that may take some time because they are new entrants. So we are in a period right now where there's a little bit of a crunch, where there are a lot more entrants who have not invested previously in developing legal talent, are doing that now, but at the same time are recruiting locally or are bringing in resources, from other offices. And I think there's a huge amount of value in them coming in because it really, we need more law firms in this market. I would say it's probably one of the few markets in the world that I would say is actually under-lawyered at this point, which is rare to say, but it really is. And I do think there's seeing more law firms here, seeing more law firms operate here, seeing them invest in local talent more, seeing them take graduates of universities, send them to international offices to get trained, have them work collaboratively with Saudi lawyers and international lawyers to develop their talents. I think that's hugely important and very much needed. And I do think that a lot of these law firms are doing that, particularly those that are new entrants. Those of us that have been in the market for a long time have been doing that for a long time. The new entrants are starting to do that, and hopefully they'll continue to do that.
Salman Al-Sudairi from Lathan and Watkins LLP. Salman, thank you so much for your time. This is very interesting, and thank you for the reports that you guys are publishing, which we came across, and it was really great to get your insight on that and other things. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's get to the news. Saudi Arabia is to establish a Riyadh anti-corruption platform. Saudi Arabia, in collaboration with the United Nations, has committed $20 million to establish the Riyadh anti-corruption platform. The initiative is part of a broader effort under the Riyadh Initiative, which aims to enhance international cooperation in the fight against corruption.
The platform will provide operational support to anti-corruption authorities globally, facilitating better communication and collaboration among law enforcement agencies. This development is expected to significantly bolster efforts to combat corruption and recover stolen assets worldwide.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The Riyadh Initiative is supported by the UN Office on Drugs and Crime and the Saudi Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority, Nazaha, which seeks to strengthen global anti-corruption networks. And the initiative aligns with Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 goals, obviously, which emphasize transparency and integrity. And everybody, I think, has a little bit of a background on some of the efforts that have been undertaken by Nazaha since the vision launched.
I think Nazaha, first of all, Nazaha is my favorite text message to receive on my Saudi phone. You get it, and it's just like, we got all these guys on corruption, and it's obviously in Arabic, so I got to translate it, and then I'm like, okay. And what I love about this, and I think is great, and thank you for sharing this, is that it's supported by the UN office, UNODC. Obviously, Nazaha is part of it as well, but it just sort of shows that Saudi Arabia's anti-corruption efforts are, at first was confusing and may have been something that it was a little bit difficult to understand because, it's just the way that the transformation was happening. It's like, okay, this is a huge focus for us now. Corruption is not going to be tolerated at all. And what it has turned into is something that is one of the things that is attracting foreign investment now and attracting interest in investors coming in now. Investors at the company level, into funds level, into the stock market. We had a great conversation with Salman Al-Sudairi earlier about how hot the Tadawul is in terms of a destination for IPOs. You don't have that kind of business activity if you have a corruption situation a la pre-Vision 2030. Just don't, because Westerners will not come in. They will be worried about playing the system correctly. Uncertainty is not good. So this is great. It's very interesting, and it's interesting too. I think maybe we will have somebody on to discuss it, but that it's specific to Riyadh. I mean, what about the other cities? So, and how does it fit with Nazaha? I don't really know, but
I believe it's just the brand name of the initiative. They called it that, they just named the initiative the Riyadh Anti-Corruption Initiative. But I don't think that it is specific to Riyadh at all. I actually think that the anti-corruption platform will be housed kind of in some sort of collaboration between UNODC or UNODC or whatever and Nazaha, but it doesn't actually have to do it with Riyadh. It's just sponsored by kind of thing.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
The Green Riyadh Foundation has officially announced the commencement of construction work on 3 major parks in the city of Riyadh. These parks will be located in the neighborhoods of Al Muncia, Al Ramal, and Al Qasadiya, covering
Qadisiyah.
Qadisiyah. We just had this. I'm sorry, and the text is
Different,
really small.
but same.
Yeah.
Same,
Covering
but
an area
different.
exceeding 550,000 square meters. That is massive. This initiative is part of the larger Green Riyadh project, which aims to significantly enhance the quality of life for the city's residents and visitors by increasing the per capita rate of green spaces by 16 times its current level. You can see this in Riyadh right now. You can see how much greener everything's getting. So this is cool.
Yeah, and you know what? This really goes along the lines of what we were talking about when we were thinking about kind of people spending more time outdoors. Yeah, I mean, unless you have spaces where people can spend time outdoors, you're not going to get people outside, and you're going to get people plugged into their devices and on their computers more. But if you're creating green spaces like this, then that's definitely going to be a pull for people to connect more with nature, and you need that, right? So the Green Riyadh project is a key component of the vision. It aims to transform Riyadh into one of the top 100 most livable cities in the world, and the project's objectives include improving air quality, reducing temperatures, and enhancing the urban landscape by planting 7.5 million trees throughout the city by 2030. The increased green spaces are expected to improve the well-being of residents and provide numerous environmental benefits, including a reduction in CO2 levels and a decrease in energy consumption.
So the Green Riyadh project is one of my favorite things to tell other Americans about that have never been to Saudi Arabia or that are curious about Saudi Arabia, because usually the question I get, one of the, maybe like a top 5 is, isn't it really hot over there? And what's it like to be there in the summer? And it inevitably leads to an opportunity for me to tell them about the Green Riyadh project, which is truly, amazing. 7.5 million trees throughout the city in 2030. And what's remarkable about it is that it's sort of, as you spend time there, you see more and more and more of it. And the result will eventually be, as you discussed, better places to spend time outside when it's bearable. And you have these, you see them a lot alongside of roads, but then you kind of see them integrating into neighborhoods. And the net effect of this will be over enough time that there's just a lot more shade. Riyadh is definitely hot. But then you have this sort of green project, and you kind of, on LinkedIn, I'm sure you see the same thing, Hannah, where it's AI generated, like, what will Green Riyadh look like in 10 years or 20 years, whatever? And it's like Riyadh is a jungle because AI doesn't really understand. It's not what they're going for. But it's one of my favorite things that they're doing because it makes a lot of sense for the quality of life for citizens, for temperatures, to prevent erosion when it rains in the winter. I really like it, and it's fun to tell people about it because it's very Saudi in a way. It's like, 7.5 million trees. It sounds like a lot of trees. So anyway, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, go big or go home.
That's right.
The other thing about Green Riyadh and just the Saudi Green Initiative in general is that, the dust storms in the region have been so bad lately, and climate change has just exacerbated that, right? And so the more you plant, obviously, the less dust storms you have. And there's been so much progress. Like, there are less dust storms this year than previous years. There was a report a couple of months ago that I read. We can pull it out and talk about it again as well. Really just talking about how successful the kingdom has been in reducing that, which is, the most important part. And when you plant so much green space, like greenery in such a large space, you do create microclimates, right? You will end up with cooler temperatures, possibly more rain even. And it's just, I think it's a great initiative to plant this many trees across the kingdom as a whole and in Riyadh specifically. So well done.
Yeah, well done.
Saudi Arabia has displaced China as the most prolific issuer of international debt. It's displaced China amongst emerging markets, breaking Beijing's 12-year run at the top, according to Bloomberg. Quote, data for new bond sales by both governments and corporates this year reveal the kingdom is borrowing at a record pace as global debt investors begin to back Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Vision 2030 plan, unquote.
Big quote there. This is in Bloomberg, so it's really nice to see that. This also has as much to do with Saudi as it does with China. There are some changes there. Borrowers, and this is in the story, are witnessing, quote, a buying frenzy in local currency bonds that have slowed international issuance to one of the slowest paces in recent years. So this is sort of like this is as much of a China story as it is a Saudi story, but the article adds, quote, overtaking China is meaningful for Saudi Arabia, which has 1/16 of the Asian nation's GDP, and the drive to become a global business hub by the end of the decade. The latest data suggests improving sentiment as Riyadh seeks funding for projects to diversify the economy from oil and position it as a link between Asia and Europe. Meanwhile, the rest of emerging markets are also witnessing a blockbuster year for bond issuance amid falling borrowing costs and a hunt for juicy yields. I love that, juicy yields. Anyway, just kind of a big story that would be a huge story 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, and now kind of falls in line with everything that we're talking about on this podcast and hearing and seeing on Saudi Arabia and its transition, its transformation. PGA Tour and Live are we close to a deal? PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan has had a tough 2 years. He said Wednesday the difficulty in finalizing a deal with the Saudi backers of Live Golf isn't a reason for concern. He said, quote, with complexity comes opportunity before the start of the Travelers Championship at TPC River Highlands, which I've never played before and would love to. There are a lot of different factors at play, but nobody who is having the conversation is unaware of the complexity. And everyone, I think, is embracing the fact that there are obstacles and things you got to overcome in a complex situation, end quote.
So it's been more than a year since the PGA Tour and the PIF, the financial backer of the rival Live Circuit, announced plans to form a partnership. But a framework for the deal was announced on June 6, 2023, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, with plans to finalize it by the end of the year. But the deadline passed with no agreement, as you well know, Lucian.
I was in Riyadh when that was announced, and I couldn't believe it. And then when the deadline came and went, I guess I wasn't that surprised. But man, what an unbelievable finish to the PGA Championship. Sorry, the US Open that happened this last week with Rory McIlroy totally blowing it at the very end. You may have heard about that or not. And Live golfer Bryson DeChambeau taking the crown from him. So, and I mean, my boy Abdul Rahman is a loyal listener to this podcast. He is trying to find the fast forward button as quickly as possible, does not want any golf talk. But I do think that when this is announced, and I'll say this and only this, when this agreement is announced, sounds like they're close. And it's close because Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, all these guys are like, yep, we're like in the same ballpark, which is something that is not what those guys would have been saying a year ago. When this is announced, this is going to be awesome for the sport. It's going to be great for everybody. It's going to kind of end this weird civil war thing happening in golf. Looking forward to that, and I hope it happens soon. We'll see, inshallah.
Inshallah. Saudi Arabia advanced to 16th place in the World Competitiveness Ranking 2024. This is exciting. I worked on a project related to this for quite some time, so it's great to see that it's continuing to grow. This is issued by the World Competitiveness Center of the International Institute for Management Development. Saudi Arabia ranked 4th among the G20 countries, supported by improved business legislation and infrastructure.
The annual World Competitiveness Ranking is published by the International Institute for Management Development and is one of the most important references for international organizations as it compares the most competitive 67 countries globally in terms of 4 main indicators: 1, economic performance; 2, government efficiency; 3, business efficiency; and 4, infrastructures. And then 335 sub-indicators. So yeah, this is interesting. Mabruk to my Saudi boys and girls on this. It's pretty good.
Yeah. It's really exciting, and it's an area where people are working tirelessly to improve in. And so I think it's, global indices definitely help Saudi Arabia really kind of understand where there are opportunities for growth and strengthening what they're doing because of just a comparative kind of advantage of looking at the way other successful places have achieved their success and their progress. But I also think that it's it's something that Saudi is doing in a smart way, where they're really tailoring it to what the needs of the current economy is as well.
And everybody just heard this from Salman Al-Sudairi. There's so much going on all at once to make Saudi Arabia an attractive investment place, an attractive economy to enter and to participate in everything going on there. So it's not just like one organization or one government body that is putting effort into this. It's a collab between the public and private sector, and multi-ministry effort too, right? Ministry of Investment, Ministry of Economy and Planning, and then Ministry of Finance that make sure. So it's just kind of like this is a group. This is a success story for Vision 2030, really. And it's, when you're fourth among the G20 countries in competitiveness, and the reason is improved business legislation and infrastructure, you tie in the legal community into it as well. It's a great story and a good one to end on this amazing episode 15 of ours today. Khalas. Except, speaking of khalas, we are going to wrap up as we would like to always do with the Arabic word of the episode. Hannah,
right?
Please.
So you may have heard, and you may not have, in one of our episodes when I was telling you how to greet people that have finished Hajj successfully and safely, which is Hajj Mabrur. And then you were congratulating your friend. I was like, no, it's too early. Wait until they're done. I used the phrase tawinnas. So it's a really funny phrase because it's not, you cannot translate it literally. I don't even know what it would be, or if you can use it, it's very colloquial. Anyway, tawinnas means it's too soon. And so you can use it. Okay. Yeah, like toe, like more like toe, like your toes.
Tawinnas.
Tawinnas, yeah. Or tow, like a tow truck. Same,
yeah.
I guess. But to me, they sound a little bit different. Anyway. You would use it like if you're jumping the gun on something, but also like if you think about contexts where you could throw it out is like if everybody is sitting and having a great time in a gathering and somebody gets up to leave, you can say, tawinnas, where are you going? It's too soon. Or if, you ask about like, when are we going to be number one on the global competitiveness index? You could be like, tawinnas, we were 35 like 5 years ago and now we're 16. So like, hold your horses,
Hold your horses. Yeah.
It can be used as hold your horses or don't jump the gun, right? It's interchangeable.
Look at those are two phrases too that in English, like hold your horses. It's like, what does that really mean? You're in a like carriage and the horses want to go and you want to hold them. Don't get ahead of yourself. And then you also have don't jump the gun. And anyway, so this is what's so cool about this segment is you kind of get this we get to discuss the language and its differences and its difficulty in understanding it. So when I was finishing up 5 and saying khalas, I could have been like, Toanas, we haven't done our Arabic segment yet, right? Or you would have said that maybe to me. Okay.
I could have said that to you. I'd be like, Toanas, we're not done yet, So yeah, it's a good one to throw out. And if you, again, I'm trying to do phrases to give you street cred.
Street cred. I need street. I mean, that's huge for me, big time. So thank you very much. Shukran, Hannah. Great episode. Thank you so much to Salman as well. That was a terrific conversation. All of this content is kind of everywhere, so you can see it on, if you're listening to this, you're listening to it on a podcast platform, please subscribe. But you can also get it on YouTube, seeing a lot of growth there on like little segments and little conversations we have there. And then our full interviews are always there, so check it out. And he was just terrific, so we really thank him for his time.
Yeah.
Masalama.